Bienvenue, Patrick. Wonderful to speak with you today. This is a
Yeah, thank you, Vinod.
conversation. This is a conversation I've been looking forward to for some time. Maison de la Maison Sociale is working on some extraordinary things, has been working on some extraordinary things, and it's very inspiring to the entire social innovation ecosystem
Oh, wow, thank you.
across the country. So, but you've also, in your leadership, you've also pushed some boundaries on many things as well, both in as your mandates, but also within the broader social innovation ecosystem. So I'm very excited about this conversation. So I thought, why not have an open, honest, real conversation about leadership in social innovation? What do you think?
Yeah, my pleasure.
Super. So maybe we could just start with this. For people who are not familiar with Lemis, maybe you could just take a minute to give us a sense of the mission and the vision of the organization.
Yeah, so La Maison de l'Innovation Sociale is an organization, well, it's an intermediary organization that is dedicated to eliminate or at least reduce significantly the different kind of obstacles that the social innovators are facing in their social innovation journey. These obstacles can be of different, nature. They can be regulatory barriers, they can be skills, the needs for skills, specific skills development. They can be leadership capacity that they need to develop. They can be financial barriers because there is, for instance, no financial instrument to support a specific kind of initiative. Some of these initiatives are quite innovative, and sometimes they just fall between two chairs, and they just don't know how to fund it. So there are all like a myriad, a whole spectrum of barriers that these social innovators encounter in their journey. And the goal of the organization is really trying to tackle these issues to better support this emerging ecosystem of social innovation in Quebec, but also in relationship with what's happening outside Quebec in the rest of Canada.
Right. And a very, ambitious mission and vision. I'm very excited about that. But you mentioned social innovation ecosystem. So I want to get into this with you because this is one of the nodes of Social Innovation Canada. And social innovation in Canada has gone through its own journeys over the last decade or so. And there have been many things that have characterized that journey. But I'm curious to hear from your perspective, from your vantage point, how would you characterize the state of social innovation ecosystem in Canada?
So the broader ecosystem, right?
The broader ecosystem.
So you know what? I think first of all, it's an emerging ecosystem. So social innovation have been around for, since the humanity exists, right? So the social innovation as a field of practice, meaning developing a set of practices in order to accelerate the emergence of social innovations, in a world that is changing rapidly, where, we are experiencing long-term crisis, long emergencies. So I think it's an emerging field of work. It's an emerging line of work. But I feel that it's evolving very fast, in Canada and in Quebec. It's also quite vibrant now. I think that Canada and Quebec, have both been recognized as global leaders in the field of social innovation, has made significant strides in the recent years in fostering a supportive environment for social entrepreneurs, social economy, and also social innovation as a broader field of practice. Let's just think about, so we have new government programs at different levels that support that kind of work right now. Right. We have an emerging set of networks, not only Social Innovation Canada, we have like several networks emerging, throughout the country right now that are trying to connect, these practitioners of social innovation right now. We also have new funding, investment strategies, and instruments that are coming in this broader ecosystem. We see some movement in the policy and regulatory space also, where cities begin now to create regulatory sandboxes to allow for social innovation to be better experimented in the public space. And we have also, there's a growing emphasis on the Indigenous communities-led social innovation initiative in Canada. That's what I learned by interfacing our work with the rest of Canada, actually. And I was quite impressed by what these folks are doing right now. And I think that because of that, this ecosystem is really thriving, more and more in the footprints of what the social innovation generation did, like in the previous years before. And I think it's just the beginning.
Right. Yeah. You mentioned long emergencies, and I'm really curious about what what are some of the long emergencies that you particularly are paying more attention to.
Yeah, so I'm paraphrasing our friend Indy Johar, who coined a little bit that term a couple of years ago. And when I'm talking about this, I refer to the fact that the pandemics that we just experienced is not an isolated factor. It is like a small, it's a in French we say un effondrement. So it's a small crumbling that we are seeing. But I mean, we won't see a big crumbling of society. We will see a lot of these small crumblings interfacing to each other, and what's happening right now, we see in Quebec all the fires, in Halifax, in the West, it's to a level that is unprecedented. I mean, all of these emergencies are there to stay, and they are there to expand in size, in magnitude, in diversity also. So when I'm talking about an era of long emergency, I refer, to what Indy Johar was saying, is really these interconnected and nested part of the system that we are in that are reinforcing themselves, in a way that is reacting, through the way human beings, society, we interact with nature, that we interact with everything around us, actually. So it's a natural response to that, and this response is not looking good for us, and that's going to go away anytime soon. So
right, yeah. And in that, it's one thing to for change makers, for social innovators to come up with processes and practices like you've said. But there's another side to that coin, it feels, and that's what is the inner change that we are needing to do, right?
Yeah.
And as humans, as people, as social innovators. So how are you supporting social innovators from that aspect as well? Because there's a lot of inner work to be done too on these long emergencies.
Yeah, this is a very interesting question, because now you're tapping in different notions that are interconnected. Is first of all, our relationship to what is everything around us has to change, first of all. Second, there is no system change if we don't change our relationship to each other, our relationship to everything around us, not only nature but objects also, services, communities, so that's one thing. The second thing is that to go there, you need to have some mental space, and you need to work, you need to do that inner work with enough space to be reflexive on what you're doing. And right now, the rhythm of our life is, the pace of our life is going to an increasingly faster rate, and it gives us less and less and less time to reflect on these fundamental internal issues, right? So at LAMIS, we've been we identified this kind of issue at the very beginning. This is why we developed a resilient leadership program, that we incorporated within some of our incubators in order to give the change makers that space to reflect, on their own practice and to explore the tensions that they are living, in this journey of social innovation. These tensions can be, for instance, how do you reconcile the fact that you have a payroll in your social business and the impact that you want to create, you know. And sometimes these two points are very hard to reconcile, you know. There are like several tensions like that are really commanding us to do some choices, and these choices need to be done through an internal process where we know exactly why we do those choices, and they are not just let's say conditioned by the actual economic system that is in major part responsible for what these long emergencies that we are experiencing right now. So yes, to answer your question quickly, yes, it's something that we are trying to address in the work that we do with the accompanying process that we offer to change makers. Yes.
Right. I want to get into mental space a bit later, because I think it's really, really interesting and is worth talking about. But before we get there, I'd like to rewind the clocks a little bit, you know, and you've led LMIS for a number of years now, but I'd like you to, you know, just take a second to think back to your first year, you know.
Oh.
And what was it like back then? Like when there was so many opportunity spaces, so many options, so many pathways that you could have taken. What were some of the things that you considered and you embarked on? But also, what were some of the things that you wish you had embarked on, but didn't?
Okay, so when we started LMIS in 2016, you know, LMIS was a spin-off from two philanthropic foundations, first of all, with other institutional partners. So it was an organization that was coming from the community, from communities. So when we started LMIS was a dream for these founding partners to work on these barriers that they knew the grantees that they had or the organization they were supporting were experiencing. And at that time in Quebec, there was like kind of a hole, you know, in the support ecosystem for that specific, you know, issue, you know. So but the Quebec ecosystem was already quite crowded, though, back in those days, you know, with the social economy, like the community movement in Quebec that is really fundamental, you know, in the development of the social innovation ecosystem there. So we had to find like a complementary way to support the ecosystem. And we soon realized that there was we validated that huge gap of support for the very early stage initiative that were facing all these obstacles that I'm talking, you know, since the beginning of the interview. So the first year was really dedicated to survey the state of that ecosystem and to conduct small experimentation to test like a value proposition that would be adequate and complementary to the rest of that support ecosystem in order to fit well, you know, and ensure that we were not like duplicating what was already done, you know. We could have started to work on specific themes, like let's say food security and stuff like that, you know, but our goal was really to respect the intelligence in place, you know, and all the initiatives that were in the field, and not to replace them or to come like with the support of philanthropy, but by competing with these guys, you know. So we wanted to really support the emergence of the field of practice and support these guys already in the field in order through like the alleviating these obstacles that they were seeing. So that's why we did focus at that scale at the beginning, you know, at LMIS.
Right. Was there skepticism initially when you started out? Were some people saying, I'm not so sure if this is going to
work. The fact,
yeah.
Sorry, did you finish your question?
No. I was curious. Yeah.
So the answer to that is yes. Okay, and the fact that the organization was coming from institutions was one, you know, was one of the reason why. So second, the space in which we decided to settle was a space also where there were, like the answer or the solutions to that space were not defined at that point in time. So people knew that early stage initiative, and when I'm talking about early stage, I'm not even talking about a social business. I'm talking about someone coming with a prototype after a hackathon, and trying to wanting to engage in this community, maybe already being engaged in the community and just wanting, to do something about it, So this is where we found that there is like another dead valley, like that nobody was understanding how to to deal with that first dead valley. So by positioning ourselves in this space, the first reaction sometimes that we got is that, I mean, are you guys going to do that? So it's quite hard to work in that space because people coming there, they sometimes have another job, it's not sure that they want to really be involved in this, all the hassle of a social innovation initiative. What kind of value can you bring there? They are so risky, these projects, so anyways, all of that created some skepticism, and we had to demonstrate the value of acting in that specific space. And I think that we just succeeded after 7 years to demonstrate the impact of that, So
and so, what would you say? If I were to ask you, what are you most proud of? What would you say? I mean, there's so many things that the LMIS has accomplished. But if I could ask you, your top two, things that you're most proud of, what would those things be?
I have more than two, actually, but the fact that we really define a distinctive value proposition that is really complementary to the support ecosystem in Quebec is really something that, to me, I think we are all very proud of that. Okay, so the fact that this value proposition is recognized by a wide variety of stakeholders now, I think we're proud of that. The fact that the programs that we've been developing are now transferable in other regions also is something we're proud of, And I would say, from maybe a broader perspective, social innovation now is a recognized field of practice in the provincial government, in the new strategy for research and innovation in the provincial government. And it was not the case before. And I'm not saying that we are responsible for that, but we worked a lot with others, organization, in the field to do some advocacy around that, and now the government is recognizing, this through its strategy for research and innovation, which I think is great. So we're proud for that work. But what I would say that I'm the most proud of probably is that our partners, our employees, our incubees, they all tells us that nothing could have prepared them to work with LMIS, and that the organization was quite transformative for them. And honestly, it is transformative for all of us, myself included. So.
Yeah, those are very good. Those are very good stories to hear. Yeah, that's great. And the sort of the other side to that coin, I suppose, is there are things that often don't work out the way that you expect them to. And LMIS has been active on a number of different initiatives. Civic incubators, social R&D. You've done things with population health. In all of these, I'm really curious about some of the biggest risks that you took as a leader, and perhaps even, if you're open to it, telling us two things that didn't work out the way that you intended it to.
Yeah, it's a very, very good question, because the thing is that at LMIS, our posture, we always say, is that our posture is to embrace the complexity of these issues, so we're not looking for the quick fix. So risk-taking is everywhere when you have that posture, actually. Working with a diversity, multiple stakeholders coming with their own vocabulary, their own cosmogony, their own ideology, their own narrative, their own theory of change. Diverse interest, but a common objective, so you need to make that work. So it's a risk in itself. Mediating that is a big risk. framing our initiative in a way that foster a culture of experimentation within public institutions that are risk-averse by nature. It is also a big risk, you know. Working on systemic barriers, these regulatory financial obstacles, they are all systemic. They don't only need change in resources, but they need change in paradigms, mental models, mentalities, you know, in different area of the system. So by nature, it is a big risk. So we did choose to go the hard work pathway, you know, and not the quick fix pathway, which in itself was, you know, like one of the biggest risks I took in my professional life.
Right.
And I say that I don't have a lot of regrets because it was all about learning and about learning and about experimenting and re-injecting these learnings. I had some objective though in 2016 when I joined LAMIS. I gave myself 5 years to achieve them. It took me 7 years to get mostly there, you know. And these objectives were to define, develop, and validate a relevant and scalable value proposition to fund the organization, to allow the organization to take that kind of risk, you know, and to create strong links between Quebec and the rest of Canada. So I would say that the thing that I would have seen maybe going maybe more would be the development of the relationship between Canada and Quebec. It's really something that needs to be nurtured over the long run because there are like two culture of social innovation, you know, so we don't have the same take on social innovation, and we're not having the same posture on social innovation. And it's not only a question of a language, it's a question of culture also. So it's something that needs to be developed at its own pace. But there is a lot of value to be created there. Okay, so I would say it's not a regret at all. It's just something that I'm anxious to see happening, you know, to another level, another scale right now.
Right. So a couple of questions I'd love to dive into. So the two cultures of social innovation is really interesting. That's a really neat observation. And you know, I'm really curious about how you believe these two cultures can be blended, if you will. You know, and if there is a way to blend the two cultures of social innovation, or if you believe that these will be two distinct cultures of social innovation.
I think both answers are true, actually. You know, so the thing is that these two cultures are not antagonists by nature at all. They can be blended for sure. Okay. I would say that in Quebec, we have this state provenance. We have this history of social innovation being supported by the community sector and the social economy sector that is very strong in Quebec. Philanthropy is starting to take more place in Quebec, but if we are comparing to the rest of Canada, philanthropy is a lot more present, you know. In Quebec, we are the practice of design is part of the social innovation space, you know. I would say in the rest of Canada, conversations are the basis of everything, you know. So there are like these differences that I would say reconciliation with the First People in the rest of Canada is a lot more, it's an active topic, a lot more than here. You know, so I think it's just a question of making that, you know, more visible, and we can learn from that. And we're starting because we've been developing some community of practice that are transnational now. And the goal being to create that kind of cross-pollination between Quebec and the rest of Canada. And actually, it's pretty interesting what's happening. So blending is certainly something that can happen. At the same time, because of the history, because of the way, you know, people are doing things in Quebec, you will always see that distinctive, you know, flavor of social innovation here that is anchored in history.
Right.
But to me, one is not antagonist to the other at all.
Right.
And the fact that we're facing these long emergency, they are, you know, they don't stay at the frontier, right? So I mean, learnings needs to be cross-learnings, cross-pollination, I mean, on these collective issue that we have is something that needs to be everywhere.
Yeah, terrific. And it's kind of a funny notion that you mentioned the first death valley, and in many ways, Lemis could have also could have gone through the first death valley, right? And so, as an organization yourself, you're supporting other groups and prototypes and social innovators in that, but Lemis itself is a social innovation that has survived this and is thriving the beyond that first death valley. Listen, I want to come back to the mental space that you mentioned because
we hope so, by the way,
oh,
from what you just said, we hope so. Okay.
Right.
But it's looking good. It's looking good.
Right. Yeah. You've wrapped up, so we'll see what happens now. Right?
Okay.
Yeah. I want to come back to mental space, particularly in the context of well-being. And this is something that at Future of Good we are very interested in. We have an intense interest in the state of well-being of changemakers and social innovators today. And I'd love to ask you, perhaps a personal question. How do you take care of yourself, right? How do you take care of your mental, emotional, physical well-being?
You know what, Vinod, it's always fragile. Because I mean, it's a fine balance between everything you want to invest to maximize the impact you have in the world with others, and at the same time recognizing that you're not alone in that space. And and sometimes you need, I mean, the mob around you is so important, having someone on your back sometime and people having yourself on their back, and solidarity is so important. So that's one thing, most of us in this line of work, majority of us, I think, we have a tendency to focus on the impact that we want to create at the detriment to our own health, So I was talking to you about the resilient leadership program that we've been developing. So we were sensitive, to that issue from the beginning, because these tensions, we see them everywhere in change makers, so that's one thing. But we also realized that even our colleagues, that we needed to give some space to our colleagues within the organization to explore and do some inner work, in order to find the right balance between these two things, and also find and understand when to let go, actually, which is not easy in this line of work. We discovered some programs like the how is it called, the Wolf Willow Institute for System Learning, doing that kind of retreat that with change makers to allow to do deep reflexive exploration, hybridizing also different worldviews around what we do, to extract ourselves a little bit, do some metacognition on what we do, and to come back, with with some regenerated, energy, to that kind of work. So cultivating it, I think, is key. And fortunately, in this ecosystem, we have more and more organizations that are addressing these issues, like the Wolf Willow folks. So, and some others, of course. But I think it's important to do that kind of work on I would say, a continuous basis. Also trying to find some, we creating like mobs of people that around you that experience similar issues, practitioners. So I'm not talking about community of practice, but more like a community of support, we can have a honest talk about what works, what doesn't, a little bit like what we're doing right now. I think I just love that kind of talk with people, because it's help us externalize, all of these feelings that we have inside, and just by liberating them, half of the tension is gone, so, and can come back, and then we can pursue the work that needs to be done. So
Yeah. Well, listen, I'm open to relieving tension with you anytime. So um, yeah, I want to pick up on this, because you mentioned a few times this solidarity, feeling of solidarity, and these mobs of people. So I want to ask you about, you know, your friends. Not so much the friends that you go have a cocktail with, although with that too. But there are probably folks that um, you did not imagine that you would be spending so much time with, perhaps 5 years ago, 7 years ago. So, who did you not imagine to be, you know, working with so closely today? Like, who do you go to now for this support, for this wisdom that you didn't before?
This is, you have very interesting question, Vinod, because you know what, I'm going to tell you, I may be quite atypical in that respect. The thing is that I've always been throughout, I mean, my whole life at the center of different, mobs. And I think that I'm trying to find my wisdom at the center of different worldviews, different mobs, different way of thinking, and sometimes quite antagonist way of thinking, And I like debating. I like being inspired by people who don't think like I think. I like trying to find a way to harmonize different worldviews, not always trying to find a compromise, but see how 1 + 1 = 5,
Right.
And to me, wisdom, in complex science, we always say that innovation happens, in the margin, and
Right.
I think that wisdom also can happen in the margin, So when you have that plurality of perspective, that create a set of fail-safe about your own way of thinking and your own bias and your own, way of your epistemology, actually. I mean, how do you know what you know? Is it only like a conditioned ideology, or is it something that is still relevant in the world that you live in? So for me, wisdom is being positioned at the center of all of these and getting inspired by people from the First Nation, people from the social economy, people from the private sector, people from the right wing sometimes, who will have like some take on stuff that will make me understand how they think, and how we can, to take like the word of Adam, what's his name, the guy who wrote Working with the Enemy, so I don't, collaborating with the enemy, I don't remember the name, it's Adam, I don't remember his last name, but anyways, so to me, margin interstices are a space for developing wisdom.
Right.
That's what I think.
Right. I think it's Adam Kahane who you are.
Kahane, yeah, Adam Kahane. Sorry about that. Yeah, this is that. Yeah.
This is a very controversial view in the ecosystem, because there are folks who are very uncomfortable with listening to the far right. You mentioned, I like debates, and I like listening to people who don't believe in the same things that I believe in. But this in particular is very uncomfortable for
it is for me too, by the way.
Is for you too, right? It's a lot
oh
of,
yeah,
right.
It is.
So do you have any, like, how do you prepare for something like that? What have you done to really see the point of view of people who don't believe in the same things that you believe in?
This is where this inner work we were talking before is important,
Right.
because you learn to listen, not to argue, but to listen to understand. That's one thing. And then trying to also understand where ideologies, where conditioned thinking is coming from a cultural perspective,
Hmm.
what are the symbols, behind that? What are the rituals that reinforce these way of thinking? So trying to see, social cognition, or let's say social cohesion, as an externality, a cultural externality, as something that is emerging out of these rituals, symbols, norms that are created in these patches of people, that don't think like you do. So understanding that, to me, is a key condition if you want to become, for instance, let's say a systemic mediator, someone who will work with different publics to engage them in, let's say, the social ecological transition. It's not something that we can do only by working with the people that thinks with us. It's not possible. We need that. There are some, system hospicing that needs to be done. We need to accompany grief of people that are in the old system. You need to re-enchant people. You need to see how we can take the assets of the whole system and repurpose them for a new purpose that is more desirable collectively. If we want to do that, it's important that we understand how people think, and what are their mental models, their mentality, where it's coming from, and what is the common denominator at the beginning, at the root of that, and doesn't mean that I'm comfortable with that. I'm not. So it doesn't mean that it is something that is easy to do. It's not. But you know what? Without that kind of systemic mediation between the field and actual institutions, social movements, between, let's say, defining new way to live together and to collaborate, the inner work that needs to be done, the new institutions we need to develop to better support, let's say, the social ecological transition. I think it's a key skill set that people needs to develop, to be able to be in that interstices space, but always having your center, your political view as with a big P, not like partisan, but I mean your big P, political agency perspective on the impact that you want to see the world, and that you want to see in the world.
Right. Listen, we just got a couple of minutes here, and I perhaps would like to close with a question around imagination, and ask you to imagine for us the next version of the social innovation ecosystem, because we've gone through a pandemic. There's been a lot that has been reset because of the pandemic itself. Everything around how we care for our families, our social circles, our workplaces, a whole bunch of things have gotten reset. In many ways, practice and process is also getting reset because of the last 3 years. But I'm curious to hear from you. Let's imagine 10 years from now. It's 2033. Paint us a picture of how you envision the ecosystem being. What's the same? What's radically different?
Okay.
What are we working on?
Okay. So you're not coming with easy questions. So
it's our style here. Yeah.
Let me do. Okay. Let me try something. I think that first of all, the social innovations ecosystem might become a more integrative innovation system that will be more geared towards regeneration. So maybe social impact will become regenerative impact, where we will see humans as part of the system and not necessarily the center of the system, you know? So that might be a shift that honestly, I'm already in the ecosystem, see that kind of narrative emerging a little bit, you know? How can we go from a human-centered approach to social innovation to a land or a living system, you know, approach and innovation, you know, where human beings are part of it, but it's more like humility-centered, let's say it that way, you know? Right. So that's one thing. A second thing would be impact. I see the definition of impact, if it's still something relevant, because it might not, you know. But I see a perspective on system that will go beyond the narrative, you know, because everyone's talking about system right now, and it's something that we all have a hard time understanding from, you know, which entry point we can have an impact on the system. Right. So to me, working at system scale is more than breaking silos, for instance. You know, it's we're more talking about breaking glass ceilings and glass floors between citizens, community, and organization, institutions, social movements. You know, so to me, it needs a new role. I was talking about system mediators. We need to have that role becoming explicit in impact projects, teams, a little bit like let's say the developmental evaluators, for instance, was a role that didn't exist 20 years ago, but like about 10, 15 years ago, it's something that emerged, and now it's part of our practice, you know? So system mediation is something that's lacking, you know? So, and we see like the cake, you know, of a system is something that is, it's like every layer float a little bit in the air without being that connected, you know? So system mediation is something that needs to emerge in this ecosystem for sure. I think that we need to define a new balance sheet, to paraphrase again in the JOR, you know, at system level that account for system externalities and also systemic co-benefits of all initiative that we support in this society. I could go on, you know?
Right.
Well, you want me to go on?
Yeah, there's some really interesting things that you mentioned here. So I'm you know,
so let me finish with two things.
Sure.
Okay,
yeah.
can I? Okay, good. I think that the social innovation ecosystem will also probably shift from supporting pilots and experimentation that are very localized to supporting system demonstrators. It's something that in London, I've seen recently, you know, at the Civic Square initiative, you know, seeing like a pilot as a system demonstrator. It is something that needs to embody the characteristic and scale of an alternative system. So you can showcase it to stakeholders and it can become something that inspire decision makers, you know? So, and maybe one last thing I would say is that maybe seeing social innovation as being a normalized field of practice within actual institutions or maybe in new ones that will better fit the bill, such as this idea of creating 7th-generation chambers within our democracy, you know, that will ensure that the project that we are supporting the policies, you know, the bills, you know, are taking into account these 7 generations coming after us, you know. So that kind of stuff, I think, would be kind of awesome, you know, if they were happening within the ecosystem in a couple of years.
Well, listen, Patrick, you know, we've had just a short period of time, but we have talked about so many things, quite a breadth of things, from long emergencies to mental space to, you know, death valleys and 2 cultures of social innovation, system demonstrators, cultural externalities, you know, system mediators, etc. So covered a lot of ground here. I just want to say thank you so much for your time, and you know, really admired your leadership over the last many years, and congratulations again on a you know really bringing Lemis to life, and and it's a thriving organization that supports many other groups in a variety of regions and social innovations. So congratulations again, and I'm really excited to see what you're up to next.
Thank you so much, Vinod. And you know what? It's been like a collective journey. So thank you. It was a collective leadership journey. So thank you so much for your interest. And it's been a pleasure just discussing these topics with you anytime.